Welp, welcome to the Werewolves' PG-13 take on Scream.
One, two, three!
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I am here with about episode 18 of Halloween Horror Movie Review Season 3. And this episode is going to be for the third Wes Craven film this season. It's been currently his weaker films this year. And this is actually for not his weaker, but one of his worst. Boy. By far the worst Wes Craven movie is getting reviewed today. And that film is going to be for 2005's notorious bomb, Cursed. Welcome back to the shit year that was 2005. Guys, for those of you in the horror community, you guys should probably know 2005 was one of the worst years for horror movies ever. There were so many bad horror movies that came out. There were maybe a few exceptions like Saw 2, The Devil's Rejects, and maybe, in my opinion anyways, the Amityville Horror remake were pretty fine. At least we had those, and maybe to some people in the UK, The Descent, but technically in my area that came out in 2006, but technically since it came out in the UK, I'll count The Descent. But other than that, hardly anything good from the horror movie genre came out in 2005. This is probably the year of bad PG-13 horror movies, bad horror remakes, like The Fog. Just a lot of bad horror films. And a lot of bad movies too. But anyway, on to the plot of this movie. Well, the plot of this movie is that a girl named Ellie has been taking care of her younger brother Jimmy since their parents died. One night, after picking him up from a party, they are involved in a car accident on Mulholland Drive. While trying to rescue a woman from the other car, a creature attacks and kills her, also injuring both Ellie and Jimmy. After some research, Jimmy realizes the creature could only have been a werewolf. Yeah, and this film has one of the most notorious troubled productions ever. Here's how this film was made. Well, the first draft of the script was written by Kevin Williamson in August 2000 and followed the exploits of a New York City serial killer who discovered that his lethal tendencies are due to his diabolical nature. Both screenwriters Son Hood and Tony Guyton did rewrites of Williams' original script during the development process. Dimension Films co-founder Bob Weinstein announced in October 2002 that Curse would reinvent the werewolf genre and Wes Craven would direct, with the movie being officially released on August 8, 2003. Craven was in the final stage of pre-production with the movie Pulse, when Weinstein abruptly pulled the movie from the schedule 10 days before shooting and cut through all the slow lanes, getting Cursed off and running. Craven was reportedly not pleased, so Weinstein doubled his pay in order for him to do the werewolf film. Wow. That's one bad flag in production. The director deemed the script too tonally similar to his film Vampire in Brooklyn, but felt pressured by the studio, leading him to ultimately sign on. Pretty much Wes and Kevin are apparently this dynamic team, and they were confident that their collaboration would prove to be a winner, Weinstein stated her thoughts. In December of 2002, a press release for the project described Curse as a modern hip and twist on the classic werewolf tale, and Dimension Films also announced that Academy Award winner makeup effects designer Rick Baker would be in charge of the overall design of the werewolves. Baker had originally turned down the offer due to the very limited time he had to create all the designs and eventual acceptance on the only condition to be able to work without any studio interference. Look how that turned out. And once again, it was originally planned for 2003. The film was pretty much a notable example, ended up being a notable example, of development hell. It took 2 more years to be made than originally planned, which producers Bob and Harvey Weinstein kept asking for reshoots, and 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 changes to the plot. re-edited the movie to give a PG-13 rating rather than the original intended R rating, and they fired veteran makeup artist Rick Baker to replace the werewolves he had created with CGI pieces of shit. And what's more, they wanted this movie to be like Scream again. So they changed that, so they changed the ending to match the ending of Scream because they thought it would have worked better. But after all the production was finally finished, Curse would get to finally be released into theaters on February 25th, 2005, and the film was a at the box office, and it was a with critics and with horror fans. Craven himself was very displeased with the final result, which is not a shock at all. As for my reaction, just already starting this review, this is Wes Craven's worst movie by a landslide. And guys, I haven't seen My Soul to Take, but I've heard it's just as bad as this film. Anyways, this is one of those films where the production is more interesting than the movie itself, and also pretty much the same fucking movie as a way better Wes Craven movie called Scream. Except, just imagine if Scream were not a slasher movie about a killer who's seen way too many movies. Think of it as a movie about werewolves. And think of it if it were not rated R, and if it were rated PG-13 and full of CGI. CGI garbage. Yeah. You're pretty much just watching Scream again. A remake of Scream. That's pretty much what this movie is. Like, then again, Harvey Weinstein wanted the film to be like Scream. So, yeah. Poor Wes Craven. Was once a director that could, around the time, that could strike fear into children and even while they sleep. With, of course, I speak of Freddy Krueger, one of Craven's first masterpieces, A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. And then, around the time this movie came out, his last big scare would be Scream and Scream 2. Not scary per se, but definitely a good suspense thriller and a good take on horror movies, and still one of the best horror movies of the 90s. But after that, he went on to do They. And that movie apparently turned out to be kind of a big dip in quality. I also did Scream 3, which was pretty much the film that killed the Scream franchise for 10 years. And then, this is where he really lost his mojo. After this. Like, Cursed is just a werewolf movie about a brother and sister who change into werewolves and must fight together to stop it. Yeah, go team. The premise of Cursed sounds creepy, but the execution is not. I was expecting something reasonably good since this movie's directed by a legend. Unfortunately, Cursed is no Scream. Well, technically it is, except it's a shitty version of it. It appears he really lost his touch here, as this movie was not even scary, nor is it creative. There's some funny and entertaining scenes, but the movie's mostly disappointment. The horror's weak, the humor could have saved the film, but the screenplay is just really bad. Kevin Williamson wrote it, and he did a rather poor job since there are a lot of plot holes. Craven Williamson had made some pretty good films in the past, but this is not one they should be proud of. In fact, rest in peace, Craven, and this is definitely not one Craven was ever proud of. The acting's okay, not good enough to save the film, though not bad enough to make it worse either. Christina Ricci gives a fine performance, but this is one of my least favorite roles she's done. I prefer her better in films like The Addams Family and Casper, Monster. Way better films starring her. And definitely an underrated actress. Joshua Jackson gives a not great performance as the boyfriend Jake. It's nothing really special, not really my favorites. Shannon Elizabeth gives a really terrible performance, and her terror scenes will most likely spark laughter instead of screams or chills. And thankfully she's only in the film for about 15 minutes. And another actress named Portia de Rossi was in the film for about 3 minutes, so there's no point watching the film just for her. And Judy Greer gives a fine performance as the bitchy Joni. Well, technically speaking, those weren't going to be the actors in the movie. They had some other different actors planned, but since the reshoots happened, they replaced those actors. And the special effects just look really bad, and this brings down the movie significantly. The werewolves look so bad that it kills any chance of suspense, scares, and thrills. I'm not sure if this was done on purpose or not. Like with Curse, Wes Craven attempted to do the same with the werewolf genre as he did with the slasher genre a decade earlier. Inject some tongue-in-cheek humor into the horror, get a photogenic cast of Hollywood talent to help lure in the teens, include knowing references to notable genre classics for older fans, and they sit back and rank in the cash. Except that this time around, he wasn't exactly deafened by the sound of box office totals raining, and it's easy to see why. Kevin Williamson's entire script feels like an old episode of a Dawson's Creek series, being as much about teenage trials and tribulations as it is hurting monsters. Craven's direction was uninspired here. He had realized probably too late, perhaps, that audiences might finally be fed up with Nodwink around the time this movie came out. Postmodernity crap, and the monsters themselves rely too heavily on substandard CGI to be convincing. Like, Rick Baker, who did American Werewolf in London, was going to be involved in their design, but could be hardly blamed for the pathetic digital beasts that appear on screen, because then again, they fired Rick Baker, which was pretty much a dumb move on their parts. The Weinstein brothers did anyways. And so they pretty much fucked themselves over on chances of good-looking werewolves with CGI crap. Like, and pretty much Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg play the siblings. As for the siblings' chemistry, their chemistry is awful. All they do the whole movie, bicker, get mad, get angrily argue with each other the whole entire movie. They just sound like Ricci and Eisenberg get fine performances, but they just sound so irritated and bored. It's like they're just like waiting to be rap shootings so they can get their paychecks, go home. Like, their chemistry is the worst in this movie. Like their characters are not likable, they're not even interesting, and you just don't care about them. But the rest of the cast are just merely adequate, just plain awful. And Scott Bios has a pointless cameo in this, and Milo, I forget his last name, but Milo, the guy who plays Rocky's son in Rocky Balboa and briefly appeared in Creed 2 is in this. Like wow, like before Rocky Balboa finally revived, this was the best shit you could get before actually finally making a name of yourself in Rocky Balboa. This was the best you could get for horror. Like, screenplay is just really bad, and the dialogue is even worse despite more time in rewriting. It will leave you wonder who too much worse was the original screenplay was. The story is total cliche, and it's nothing new to the werewolf genre. The subplots have nothing to do with the main story, despite just adding another girl into the movie. And I wonder, like, where's the humor part of this movie that people keep talking about? Well, and what's worse, part of the movie were the direction, lighting, and cinematography. It's just horrible. Like, all they did was put some graphic pictures into the movie with fake blood all over, and the werewolf just consists of very bad CGI, like I've already said. And the movie was bad that the studio had to delay the release a year later, and many actors were pulled out of the movie because of bad screenplay. Like, the whole production was more interesting than this entire movie. But is there good qualities? Fine, yeah, sure, some anyways. The movie, I will say, was not Wes Craven's fault at all, and this was not even the movie he wanted to do. What really happened, the reason for this movie failing, was because of the jackass Weinstein brothers. This movie pretty much happened because of studio interference, wanting, no, we're doing this one. And then another director said, no, we're not doing this. And another director, no, we're not doing this. Do the one we want to do. Yeah, so they basically treated Wes Craven like garbage and made him do their version he did not want to do. They kept throwing out his plans and replacing them with his own. And two, there are some funny moments occasionally, like one of the werewolves gives the middle finger just out of nowhere, and not because it's a funny scene, because it's just random and you don't expect it. Like, why is there a wolf giving the middle finger? Like, out of freaking nowhere. And finally, the bully Bo is actually, that Milo V plays, is actually a pretty entertaining character because of his over-the-top performance, and the gym scene is pretty hilarious, I will say. And heck, the bully actually turns out to be kind of a likable character, because at first he seems all douchey and stuff, but it turns out there's actually kind of a funny reason as to kind of why he's somewhat of a bully, and he actually kind of becomes Jimmy's friend in the end, so he actually gets better character developments than anybody else in this film does. And in fact, I kind of wish he appeared more in the film more. Kind of helped out with the finale, he should have been in the film more. He was a much more interesting character than everybody else. Other than those, there was just about nothing great about this movie, and it's a shame we will never see the true Wes Craven version we could have had. What could have been a great werewolf movie that could have revived the werewolf genre at a time when slasher sequels were fading from existence in favor of slasher remakes instead, was instead just a dump to February or January horror film that faded from existence and will never be remembered. So in the end, Cursed is a better title, because this movie was cursed to fail beyond belief. This movie can be avoided at all costs by both Craven and werewolf fans for their own sake. Anyway, that's it for my review of Cursed, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Cursed, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, please just avoid this movie altogether because it's not even worth a single watch whatsoever, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Cursed 2005, I'm going to give Cursed 2005 a 3.5 out of 10. There we go. That wraps up my review for Cursed, so you're wondering what the next episode's going to be. Well, the next episode is going to be for the next installment of the Omen franchise, and this was for the third film, the one where Damien finally grew up. The first installment of the franchise to get a fuck this movie from Cody Leach last year. And, yeah, this film is the final conflict, Omen 3. That's next. Oh boy. That's going to be fun to talk about. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this episode. Thank y'all for watching. And if you like this and want to see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.